Good afternoon, everybody. It's once again Ted the Speed Learner, and I'm going to address this video to Phlowerchyld. The reason I'm going to do this is because he did a better job of presenting his case than the other kid did, and I'm going to clearly show this. I'm also going to show in this video how the teacher should have handled Jeff Bliss, and how the teacher would have handled me had I been in that same situation. Okay? Now, the first major difference between Phlowerchyld and the other kid I was dealing with was that Phlowerchyld has an easily remembered and easily pronounceable username. That's first. So I admire Phlowerchyld for his username. Very good username. Secondly, every one of Phlowerchild's arguments are grammatically correct. They are well proofread and well stated. They're full of Swiss cheese, but they're well stated. So that means he actually has the credentials to go after me. I admire that. Okay, so let's get down to business. First of all, if you, Phlowerchyld, were in the same room as Jeff Bliss, I would listen to you over Jeff Bliss. And I will state for the record once again that I do not believe that that teacher of Jeff Bliss was in the right. She was totally wrong. This is not a matter of me agreeing with that teacher. I don't agree with that teacher. This is about Jeff Bliss's credentials, nothing else. Okay? So, let's go into this, shall we? Now, Phlowerchyld writes this comment to me. There are plenty of things I consider myself an expert on. Well, there's plenty of things I consider myself an expert on too, but I actually can prove a lot of my expertise. I'm a chess champion. Stop right there. Can your chess teacher validate that? Do you have awards? Do you have certificates to say you're a chess champion? Have you been in major competitions that have been written about in newspaper articles? Now start presenting them credentials now. You've got my attention. A local acting talent. Does that mean that your acting coach says you're an acting talent? Does that mean you've won awards for your acting talent? Does that mean that there are local critics who have written articles about you and say you're a local acting talent? Let's see them credentials. And an expert swimmer, for example. Okay, does that mean that your coach says you're an expert swimmer? Does that mean you've won ribbons and awards for being an expert swimmer? Have you had newspaper articles written about you that say you're an expert swimmer? Let's see those credentials. If a novice chess player gave a suggestion for me mid-game, one could naturally assume that said move would probably be garbage. But he has little experience. By the way, if you're going to present an argument, don't use expletives. That pretty much deflates your argument right off the bat. Come on, you're supposed to be an academic scholar. You're supposed to be able to give these arguments without having to resort to expletives. Good lesson. But I would at least still take the few seconds to look at the combination he suggested because I'm willing to learn. I wouldn't. Not at all. And you're going to find out why in just a little bit. For a teacher, your attitude is way off base. No, it's right on the money. And I'll prove that. Let's go through this letter. Bear with me, I get parched pretty easily. Are we all ready? I've already stated that I disagree with the basic premise of your videos, but I'll get into that in just a second. Okay, I can wait. Just because I don't have a master's in teaching does not necessarily mean I don't have an education. That's true. I am not battling these teachers because I have a master's in teaching. That's true. I am battling these teachers because I have enough of an intelligence to say that I know just about as much as they do. That's also true. Let's back this up, shall we? I was taught in a rural community school. Okay? I went to a technical institute at a city public school, okay, and had a completely different teaching environment there than I did at the rural school. But then I went on to college, and I was taught by college professors. So I've had 3 different teaching environments. Now, let's add into those credentials. I was a part of 4-H. I actually won ribbons, not just at the county level, but also at the state level. Wow. And I'm not going to go through a big list of how many ribbons I won. I won more than one, so there you go. So that, and those judges could be just as bad as teachers. Trust me. But we'll go on. I said that I tutored children. Yes, I did, both in Shelby and in Piatt County. Oops. Now, I also have interacted personally, well, at least on the internet, I've interacted with 600 people that you know of. But actually that number is much higher. Those are just the 600 that actually subscribe to me. Okay? Those 600 people subscribe to me. The rest of them didn't. That didn't mean I didn't interact with them. Now, I've had retail experience for 20 years. I've met teachers who have been shopping at my store. And I've heard their teaching experiences too. So, there goes your part of the argument. That's number 1. If you really think about it, this sounds like something Jeff Bliss would say. Jeff Bliss would never say anything like this. Why? Because he's a sophomore dropout. He can't compare his credentials to mine. I know because I've read articles about this kid. Lots of articles about this kid. And I can tell you, he couldn't possibly come up with an argument better than that. I may not have formally been in a classroom, but it doesn't have to be that way. I actually have been in many, many classrooms, and I've been taught by over 20 teachers. I have personally interacted with over 600 people. I've interacted with over 1,000 people. Well over 1,000. All over the world. That gives me the qualifications to say that adult ed was wrong. It actually gives me the qualifications. I think all education is wrong. And I'm willing to back it up. Wait, you haven't formally been in a classroom, which of course I've just dismissed. Like ever? Maybe I have misheard and you were saying that you weren't formally in Jeff Bliss's classroom. I wasn't in his classroom. I didn't have to be. I've done research on Columbine, Paducah, Kentucky, Jonesboro, Arkansas, and dozens more. I am well versed in the educational community. In which case you have far less credentials. No, I have a lot of credentials. I would trust his opinion on how bad the teacher's methods are over some guy who's never attended that school. That's foolish. Not to mention that most of us have personally met over 600 people. Online and out in the real public. Let me tell you something. I've been to 185 looking for Lincoln wayside markers. You know what that means? I've met people along the way. I've actually met teachers who were Civil War reenactors. And to validate this, I went to Bloomington just the other day. They were having a festival. It was full of Civil War reenactors, and I actually met a teacher there. You see how your argument is already so full of holes, it's not even funny? But I'm willing to go on with you. Why? Because you have stated such a, not a good case, but a well-presented case, that I'm willing to argue this case with you. Yes, you are definitely different than Jeff Bliss. Now, had that teacher been smart, like she should have been, she should have said, Jeff Bliss, what are your credentials to criticize my teaching methods? If he couldn't present them, I would have immediately had him expelled from school and he would have never come back. Now, had Jeff Bliss taken the time and gotten some statistical analysis of all of his peers in that classroom and shown conclusively that they were all failing and it was directly attributed to those packets, he would have been listened to. Furthermore, had he done his research on the internet and found that article like I did about that teacher who criticized those packets, he could have used those credentials to have fought that teacher and still won. That's not what Jeff Bliss did. Jeff Bliss is a dropout. Pure and simple. He's a disgrace. I'm the hero here. And I'm willing to back it up. Okay. Act high and mighty. I am high and mighty. I have better credentials than you. Well, one part of that is true. I do have better credentials than you and Jeff Bliss. And I think I've clearly stated that. But that doesn't make me infallible. I never said that. I have fouled up many times. And people have caught me on YouTube and I've had to apologize. So, infallible? No, I'm not. But I do have better credentials than you and Jeff Bliss. And I'll prove it again. Who established you as high and mighty? Over 20 teachers? Yourself? No. I do hope you understand this is not much of an accomplishment. Well, and you have 20 teachers that can vouch for you. That's an accomplishment. Anybody can declare themselves high and mighty. You got it. It does not make them so. I agree. Also, what better credentials do you have than this person that you don't know? Well, I think I've clearly illustrated that. How do you know what credentials this person has? I've read articles about the guy. I've researched him. Do you internet stalk him? Don't have to. Those articles are thrown at me every day. You present your credentials, then we'll see who has the more rational, reasonable thing to say. Well, I presented mine, now where's yours? He said you are not high and mighty, and you said that you are. Neither of you had anything rational or reasonable to say. I had plenty reasonable to say. The other kid that was talking to me did not. And I blew his arguments out of the water one right after the other. I've completely discredited him, and now I'm discrediting you. Okay. You seem to be under the impression that you are making rational arguments. I am making rational arguments, and I'll prove my point. But your only real argument is that you shouldn't have to argue because obviously you are right based on the fact that you have more credentials. I only argue with people with similar credentials. If they don't have any credentials, I'm not going to even argue with them at all. I'm going to dismiss them. Now, if they get those credentials from somewhere else, then I'll argue with them. If they can't stand on their own credentials, they're dismissed until they get better credentials. And that's a better teaching method. My lesson is, if you don't have enough credentials to argue with somebody, go find credentials that you can use to argue. That's the difference. Who are you going to believe? Some cuckoo off the street or a guy with a degree in astrology? No. Let's retranslate this. Who are you going to listen to? Some cuckoo off the street or a guy with a degree in astrology? I would listen to the guy with a degree in astrology. That doesn't mean I'd agree with him, but I'd at least listen to him. The other one, I wouldn't have listened to at all. The end. Neither. I would do an extensive amount of research on the topic and then come to my own conclusion. Not quite. I would do this regardless of which person said this because an intelligent person does not assume others to be right entirely on their credentials. I'll somewhat agree to that. Somewhat. Do you know how many scientists with amazing breakthroughs were laughed at by others with more credentials within the scientific community? Why didn't you cite a case? How about Galileo? He wasn't just laughed at. He was facing execution. The aristocrats were wrong. But at least they listened to Galileo before they tried to kill him. That's the difference. They did listen to Galileo. They didn't agree with him, but they did listen to him. Now later, Galileo was indeed exonerated. But that's not the point. The point is, had Galileo not had the credentials that he did, those aristocrats would never have been forced to listen to him. In the story. Then we wouldn't have this story. Gotta go with the research, man. Try again. Okay. Do you believe everything an authority figure tells you just because they have more credentials than you on the subject? No. I'm just more willing to listen to them. Big difference. I should certainly hope not. Well, there's your answer. Also, if a man came into a movie theater and started shouting that there was a fire, I would get out of there until I found out what the situation was. How foolish. You say, can you back that up? You bet. Ever heard of the Italian Hall disaster in Calumet, Michigan? Well, if you haven't, I'm going to leave a link down here. I want you to read it. 73 people died because they listened to one man. Foolishly. Like I said, if somebody got up on that stage and said, hey, there's a fire in here, I would ask two questions. Okay, who are you to say this? What are your credentials? Are you a paramedic? Are you a firefighter? Are you a police officer? Are you the theater owner? Do you work here at the theater? Then I would say, okay, you don't have any of these credentials. All right, unless you can show me this fire, I'm not listening to you. Because I don't see smoke. I don't smell smoke. I don't see any flames. See what I mean? Big difference. It doesn't need to be a fireman. You seem to be forgetting that people don't need to base all their evidence on a single person. Well, that's true. They don't base it on a single person, but they base it on sound arguments. Big difference. If confronted with information like that, a person's first instinct should not be to ignore it or accept it based on the person's apparent credentials, but rather to question further until they find out the truth. If a fireman is telling you that there's a fire in the building, you get out, because you assume he has enough credentials to say that. If it's the theater owner, he owns the theater. Who's going to question this guy? If you get out of the theater and you find out later he didn't have the credentials to say so, then you can go after him. But if he's a theater owner, let him say it. And if he's a theater worker, I would say, well, where's your manager to say this? A theater worker seeing a fire would first go to the manager and say, hey, there's a fire, we may want to get these people out of here. Think. Think before you speak. Or otherwise you're going to be like those 73 people that are dead. Okay. The person's credentials should not be the source of the belief. I prefer to base my judgments on a mixture of my own experience, research, and the rationale of their argument. Sorry, I didn't read that right. Now for the final flaw in your argument. You argue that credentials are important because people will not believe you if you do not have the proper credentials. That's exactly correct. Except that most people believe Jeff Bliss when he says his teacher was doing a lousy job. They believe the video. They don't believe Jeff Bliss. They watched it for themselves. I watched it for myself. I didn't rely on what Jeff Bliss had to say. I watched the teacher and what she was doing. Videos don't lie. Jeff Bliss can. Big difference. So again, there goes your argument. Get it? Oh, let's go on here. This is quite funny, actually. Okay. And almost nobody believes or agrees with anything you say. That's because they're not well educated. The well-educated ones do. They're finally getting to realize what I'm really saying here. Try again. Meaning that either Jeff Bliss actually has more credentials than you on this topic, or that credentials are not nearly as important as you think they are. No, it means that the video has more credentials than Jeff Bliss. Oops. Okay, ultimately your speech about credentials is simply an excuse to ignore anyone whose opinion you do not agree with. No, another fatal flaw, which is a dangerous way to go about life. If that were true, I would agree with you, but that's not the truth. Almost every argument you came across was dismissed with a, I have more credentials, so shove off, I'm right, you're wrong. No, I said I can prove myself right and you are wrong. You can continue behaving this way as long as you like. Oh yeah, I can, because I got better credentials. There is no way I can stop you. You got it. But I hope the message gets through to you that nobody is perfect. I know nobody's perfect. I never said I was. I said I have better credentials than you, and I have proven so. And if practically everyone is telling you that you're wrong on any given subject, you should take a good look at yourself before you dismiss them. I did. I found out that they're not as well educated as I am. And I have proven my point in this video. That's why I can dismiss them. Move along. Come up with a better argument. I know you can. I've seen enough talent here, so I know you can come up with a better argument. Try again. I welcome anybody to try. This was pretty good, I have to say. As much as I laughed at this and I enjoyed it thoroughly, this was pretty good. I'm impressed. So you got my attention. Okay? I'm just doing to you what those aristocrats did to Galileo, except for the fact that I have proven myself correct and you haven't. You lost, I won. But this was quite an enjoyable debate. I have to say that. This was very enjoyable. A final ending note. Hey, this is even better. I like this. This is a nice little conclusion. Well presented. I'll give you that one. Your reply to that earlier comment, "It's his country," was silly and off track. No, it was absolutely accurate. Until he's 18 years old, he's not really considered, quote, a citizen because he doesn't have all the rights of a citizen. His parents can even tell him what he can and cannot say, what he can and cannot do. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The only thing that the naturalized citizen thing does is it guarantees you can stay in this country. The rest of it has to come from age. When you become a certain age, you get certain rights. When you become a bigger age, you get better rights. Jeff Bliss, until he turned 18, couldn't even go in the military. He couldn't smoke, he couldn't drink, he couldn't drive a car. Well, actually, he could drive a car at 16, but that's only with a learner's permit. Later, he'd have to pursue a full-scale license. And even then, the insurance would be so big and massive that it would be cost-prohibitive for him to drive. That was one of the reasons why I didn't drive until I was 22. I actually volunteered not to drive at a certain point. Well, at the beginning it wasn't that way. At the beginning I couldn't back the car out. Eventually I learned how to do that, but I still waited until I was 22 because the cost was just so massive, and I couldn't afford it. You can't afford to drive, you can't drive. Simple as that. So, let's go on here. When someone refers to their country as "back in my country, I will fight for my country," or "this is my country," they do not mean that they own the country. I'll give you that one. Or that they rule over it. Again, I'll give you that one. It simply means the country that the given person was born to, lives in, or identifies with. That's all. But you're missing the whole point. He can't really declare himself as a full citizen until he's given all the citizens' rights. Jeff Bliss didn't even have the right to vote until he was 18. He didn't have the right to drink until he was 21, and he couldn't run for office until much later than that. That's my whole point. You missed everything. Well, I have to say this was the most well-presented, flawed argument I have ever encountered. And I did thoroughly enjoy giving this presentation. This was very amusing. And no, I will not forget to give that link down here. So, wow. This was brilliant. Brilliantly wrong, but brilliant. Okay, so hopefully you'll do a little better next time. And I think I've addressed every single issue you brought up. Let's start seeing some of your credentials. I think you can do better than this. I know you can do better than this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be the teacher that Jeff Bliss's teacher wasn't. I'm going to challenge you to do better than this. Much better than this. Matter of fact, feel free to give me a video response so I can see it for myself. like Jeff Bliss, you have some real potential. You've stated your arguments carefully and clearly, and I don't think I need to go any further, except the fact that they were heavily flawed. Okay, I will tell you more in a future video. Stay tuned.